The Italian conquest of British Somaliland was a military campaign in East Africa, which took place in August 1940 between forces of Italy and those of several British and Commonwealth countries. The Italian expedition was part of the East African Campaign. Background: Africa Oriental Italiana. On 9 May 1936, Italian dictator Benito Mussolini proclaimed his Africa Oriental Italiana, formed from the newly occupied Ethiopia and the colonies of Italian Eritrea and Italian Somaliland. During the First Italo-Abyssinian War, Italy was thwarted in its colonial ambitions, when the forces of Emperor Menelik II of Ethiopia defeated the Regia Exercita at the Battle of Adua. During the Second Italo-Abyssinian War in October 1935, the Italians again invaded Ethiopia, this time from Italian Somaliland and Eritrea, while the Kingdom of Egypt remained neutral during World War II. The Anglo-Egyptian Treaty of 1936 allowed the military forces of the United Kingdom to occupy Egypt in defense of the Suez Canal. At this time, the Kingdom of Egypt included the Sudan as a condominium between Egypt and the United Kingdom known as the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. On 10 June 1940, when Mussolini led Italy into World War II against the British and the French, Italian forces in Africa became a potential threat to British supply routes along the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. While Egypt and the Suez Canal were obvious targets, an Italian invasion of either French Somaliland or British Somaliland were reasonable choices too. Mussolini initially looked past both of these small, isolated colonies and instead looked forward to propaganda triumphs in the Sudan and British East Africa. The Italian General Staff was planning for a war starting after 1942. In the summer of 1940, they were not prepared for a long war or to occupy large areas of Africa. Middle East Command. The British had based forces in Egypt since 1882, but these were greatly reduced by the terms of the Anglo-Egyptian Treaty of 1936. The small British and Commonwealth force garrisoned the Suez Canal and the Red Sea route. The canal was vital to British communications with its Far Eastern and Indian Ocean territories. In mid-1939, Lieutenant General Archibald Wavell was appointed General Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the new Middle East Command, over the Mediterranean and Middle East theaters, until the Franco-Axis armistice. The French divisions in Tunisia faced the Italian Fifth Army on the western Libyan border. In Libya, the Royal Army had about 215,000 men, and in Egypt, the British had about 36,000 troops, with another 27,500 men training in Palestine. Wavell had about 86,000 troops at his disposal for Libya, Iraq, Syria, Iran and East Africa. Faced with frontiers guarded by about 8 men to the mile, Wavell resolved to fight the Italians with delaying actions at the main posts and hope for the best. The Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden convened a conference in Khartoum at the end of October 1940. In attendance were Emperor Selassie, the South African General Jan Smuts, Wavell and the senior military commanders in East Africa, including Lieutenant General Platt and Lieutenant General Cunningham. A general plan of attack on Ethiopia, including the use of Ethiopian irregular forces, was agreed upon at the conference. In November 1940, the British and Commonwealth forces gained an intelligence advantage when the government code and cipher school at Bletchley Park broke the high-grade cipher of the Italian Royal Army in East Africa. Later that month, the replacement cipher for the Regia Aeronautica was broken by the Combined Bureau, Middle East. British Somaliland. According to the Hornby Report of 1936, the War Office intended to offer no resistance to an invasion, but this was revoked on 19 December 1939, in favour of a defence of the country and of the port of Berbera as a last resort. Financial wrangling between the War Office and the Colonial Office delayed the arrival of an infantry battalion until the 15th of May and a second battalion until the 12th of July, when the French in French Somaliland rallied to Vichy after the French armistice off the 22nd of June 1940 with Germany. The officer commanding troops in British Somaliland, Brigadier Arthur Reginald Aotearoa, was ordered to make a contingency plan for an evacuation if the colony became untenable. By August, the garrison consisted of the 1st Battalion Northern Rhodesia Regiment, the 2nd Battalion KA, the 1st East African Light Battery from Kenya, the 1st Battalion 2nd Punjab Regiment and the 3rd Battalion 15th Punjab Regiment from the colony of Aden, and the lightly armed Somaliland Camel Corps, including 37 officer and NCO reinforcements from the Southern Rhodesia Regiment. On 8 August the 2nd Battalion Black Watch arrived. The garrison was a motley with no proper base headquarters and was short of artillery, transport and signalling equipment. Aircraft had to fly from Aden while also busy with convoy patrols and air defense. 2 anti-aircraft guns were sent over from Aden, but that was the most that could be spared. Battle 3 to 4 August. On 3 August 1940, approximately 25,000 Italian troops under the command of General Guglielmo Nassi invaded British Somaliland. The Italian force included 5 colonial brigades, 3 black-shirt battalions and 5 bands of irregular troops, half a company of M11, 39 medium tanks and a squadron of L3 35th tank kits, several armoured cars, 21 howitzer batteries, pack artillery and air support. Because the hills rose to over 4,500 feet, parallel to the coast, some 50 miles inland, there were 3 approaches to Berbera, the capital and only port of consequence for wheeled and tracked vehicles. The most direct route with the widest pass was via Hargeisa, and the Italian plan was for the western column to seal off French Somaliland and then send light forces eastwards. The central column would establish a base at Hargeisa and then carry the main weight of the attack through the Murgo Pass towards Berbera. The eastern column would move to Odwina to cover the central column's flank and be prepared to link up with it if necessary. The Italians advanced in 3 columns, with the western column advancing towards Zila near the border with French Somaliland, the central column towards Hargeisa and Adadlik, the eastern column towards Odwina and Barrow in the south. Lieutenant General Carlo de Simone commanded the main central column. The Somaliland Camel Corps skirmished with and screened against the advancing Italians as the other British and Commonwealth forces slowly retired. On 5 August, the towns of Zila and Hargeisa were captured, the occupation of Zila cutting off British from French Somaliland. Odwina fell the following day, and the Italian central and eastern columns combined to launch attacks against the main British positions at Tugagan. On the 11th of August, Major General Alfred Reed Godwin Austen reached Berbera to take over command. Aerial operations began on the opening day, with the British committing aircraft from 15 squadrons, 39,112, 94,223, 47, 14,203, 84, 45, 11 and 8 squadrons. 102 sent 1 Martin, Maryland and 216 sent 1 Bristol, Bombay. The South African Air Force contributed 140 and 12 SAF squadrons equipped with Hawker Furies. 12 Squadron SAF also operated German Junkers Ju-86 aircraft, purchased from the Luftwaffe in 1937, as the Germans considered them obsolete as medium bombers. Opposing them, the Regia Aeronautica had the 4 degrees, 28 degrees and 44 degrees Group O. At least 6 squadriglia operated in the theatre: 410A and 413A, 8A, 9A and 52A, 15A. These units also operated the Savoir Marchetti ADM 79. ADM 81s and 79s were operated by 10A Squadriglia, Imamro 37 and Imamro 43 aircraft were also encountered by the British in the 2-week campaign, probably from 11A Squadriglia. The Italians attacked with 27 bombers, 23 fighters and 7 reconnaissance aircraft on the 5th of August. 5 to 6 August. On the 5th of August, the port of Zeila was occupied by the Italian Western Column. Any possibility of help from French Somaliland for the British was eliminated. Small forces then proceeded southeast along the coast and occupied the village of Bulha. The Italian Central Column, commanded by Lieutenant General Carlo de Simone, faced more difficulties because of the mountainous terrain through which it advanced. The column was held up at Hargeisa by the Camel Corps, assisted by a company of the Northern Rhodesia Regiment, but de Simone brought up some light tanks, and by the 5th of August the opposing troops had fallen back. De Simone took 2 days to reorganize at Hargeisa and then resumed his advance through the Karam Pass toward the Tugagan, a riverbed in the Asa Hills. The Eastern Column, comprising mainly irregular troops, reached Odwine on the 6th of August and then headed northwest toward Adadal, a village on the Tugagan. Chaytor used the SCC, supplemented by small patrols of the Ilalos, to conduct a delaying action as the other British and Commonwealth forces pulled back towards Tugagan. Battle of Tugagan. By the 10th of August, de Simone had closed up on the British positions behind the Tugagan and made his preparations to attack. From 7 to 8 August, the British had received reinforcements of the 1st Punjab Regiment and the 2nd Battalion Black Watch. General Archibald Wavell, Commander-in-Chief Middle East Command in Cairo, had also ordered a further battalion of infantry and more artillery to Berbera, but these reinforcements did not arrive in time. He also considered it appropriate to appoint a major general to command this expanding force, and on the 11th of August, a new commander, Godwin Austen, reached Berbera. The British defensive positions were on 6 hills overlooking the only road toward Berbera. On the 11th of August, an Italian brigade attacked the hill held by a company of the 3rd Battalion, 15th Punjab Regiment, and captured it in a costly success. 2 British counter-attacks failed, but attacks on 2 other hills were repulsed. The next day, all the British positions were attacked, and by evening, Mill Hill had been taken from the Northern Rhodesian Regiment after a determined defence. 2 of the East African light battery howitzers were lost, and the Italians established themselves in the Asa Hills, dominating the southern side of the gap through which the road to Berbera ran. From 13-14 August, no further positions were lost, but the Italians infiltrated past the defended localities. By the 14th of August, the Italians were almost in a position to cut the road, which was the only British line of supply and retreat. On the 14th of August, Godwin Austen informed Middle East Command of the situation, concluding that further resistance at Tugagan would be futile and likely to result in the loss of the force, and that a withdrawal would result in 70% of the force being saved. On the 15th of August, he received orders to withdraw from British Somaliland. Late on the 15th of August, the Italians took Observation Hill, and after dark, the defenders of Tuggagan commenced the withdrawal. The Black Watch, 2 companies of the 2nd Corps and elements of 1st Punjab Regiment formed a rearguard at Barkhasan on the Berbera Road, about 10 miles behind Tuggagan. Evacuation from Berbera. While the British made the retreat to Berbera, the Royal Navy had constructed an all-tide jetty and had commenced evacuating civilian and administrative officials. On the 16th of August, the British started to embark troops onto the waiting ships. Italian aerial assaults were made on British vessels in the Gulf of Aden and Berbera, beginning on the 8th of August to little effect. HMAS Hobart was slightly damaged in 2 of these attacks, and the auxiliary vessel Chakdana was hit by splinters in 1. On the 17th of August, an Italian column was reported at Bulha, some 40 miles west of Berbera. The light cruiser HMS Series, patrolling off the coast, engaged the column and halted it. Simon's forces advancing from Tuggagan were very cautious and did not attack the Barkhasan rearguard until late morning on the 17th of August, when they were held by determined resistance, including a fierce bayonet charge by the Black Watch. After dark, the rearguard was withdrawn to Berbera with minimal losses, and loading of the ships was completed in the early hours of the 18th of August. Although HMAS Hobart, with the force headquarters aboard, remained to collect stragglers and continue the destruction of buildings, vehicles, fuel and stores until the morning of the 19th of August before sailing for Aden. 3 sailors from Hobart, P.O.H. Jones, Ab. Hugh Sweeney and Ab. W. J. Hurren, took a QF 3-pounder Hotchkiss saluting gun on an improvised mounting to reinforce the defenders at Tuggagan. The sailors went missing and were feared dead, but became the first Australian prisoners of war. In the evacuation, 7,140 people were embarked, of whom 5,690 were frontline troops, 1,266 were civilians and 184 were sick. The local Somalis of the SCC had been given the choice of evacuation or disbandment, and the large majority chose to remain and were allowed to retain their arms. The Tug Queen was the only British ship lost in the operation. The British defenders had little interference in this operation. It is possible that this was because on the 15th of August, the Duke of Gloucester had ordered Nazi to allow the British to evacuate without too much fighting, in the hope of a peace agreement that was being promoted through Vatican mediation between Italy and Great Britain. On the 19th of August, the Italians took control of Berbera and then moved down the coast to complete their conquest of British Somaliland. The British colony was annexed by Mussolini to the Italian Empire as a part of Italian East Africa. The British air contingent tried to ease the evacuation by suppressing Italian air activity. Blenheims from 11 Squadron left Aden airstrip at 5:35 on the 18th of August and carried out a high-level bombing attack on Italian vehicles near Lafragbat. Lost a bomber to CR-42s from 410A Squadriglia, 1 crewman surviving. While the Italian fighter unit was distracted, Wellesley bombers from 223 Squadron took off from Perim Island to attack the airfield at Addis Ababa and destroyed the Duke of Gloucester's personal aircraft. 1 Edem 79, 1 Savoir Marchetti Edem 75, and 3 California. 133 aircraft were destroyed according to Italian records, and Edem 79 and Edem 81 were badly damaged. Aftermath analysis. The Italians had shown an ability to coordinate columns separated by many miles of desert, and the British forces had kept the discipline during the retreat and preserved most of the forces. Mussolini boasted that Italy had conquered a territory the size of England in the Horn of Africa. News of the evacuation came as a shock to British public opinion, but Wavell backed Godwin Austen, saying that he had judged the situation correctly. British Somaliland was annexed to Italian East Africa. Simone wrote that the Italians captured 5 guns, 5 mortars, more than 100 trucks, 3 Bren gun carriers, 30 anti-tank guns, 71 machine guns, many small arms and much ammunition. The port of Berbera was used by the Italian submarines of the Red Sea Flotilla as a small base in the last months of 1940. Winston Churchill criticized Wavell for the loss of British Somaliland. Because of the few casualties, Churchill thought that the colony had not been adequately defended and proposed a court of inquiry. Wavell refused to hold an inquiry, called it a textbook withdrawal in the face of superior numbers, and that a bloody butcher's bill is not the sign of a good tactician. Churchill was said by General John Dill to have been moved to greater anger than he had ever seen him in before, and this was the beginning of the end of Churchill's confidence in Wavell. One important consequence was written in Time magazine that the British lost prestige among Arabs. Casualties in 1954. ISO. Playfair, the British official historian, wrote of 260 British casualties and estimated Italian losses of 2,052 men. In 1993, Raw wrote that 38 of the British casualties had been killed and 222 wounded. In 2007, Molinari recorded 1,995 Italian casualties. Most Italian losses were suffered by the Royal Corps of Colonial Troops, and only 161 casualties were Italian. Simone estimated that about 1,000 Somali irregulars fighting with the British became casualties. Lieutenant General Luigi Frasci, commander of the Italian East African Northern Sector, also referred to these casualties in his writings and believed that the Somalis fighting as armed bands on the Italian side suffered 2,000 casualties. Subsequent operations. On 16 March 1941, the British executed Operation Appearance from Aden. 2 battalions from the Indian Army and 1 Somali commando detachment were landed on either side of Berbera from transports escorted by HMS Glasgow, HMS Gailden, HMS Kandahar and HMS Kingston. 2 Sikh battalions that had been part of the Defence Force in August 1940 had made the first successful Allied landing on an enemy-held beach of the war, and the Italian 70th Colonial Brigade offered little resistance. Repairs began on the port and supplies for the 11th African Division began to pass through within a week, saving 500 miles of transport by road. The British recaptured the whole of British Somaliland, and on 8 April, Chater was appointed military governor. Order of battle. The Italian force attacking British Somaliland in August 1940 was commanded by Nassi. The force included 23 colonial battalions of regular native troops in 5 brigades, 3 black shirt battalions, and 3 bands of Dubats and other locally recruited irregulars. The Italians also had armored vehicles, artillery, and, most importantly, superior air support. The Italian troops numbered about 24,000. Citations